Today I want to talk to you about the difference in the lack of empathy we see in autism and the lack of empathy that we see in narcissism or other personality disorders. They're actually very different. So the lack of empathy you see in autism and the lack of empathy we see in narcissism are actually extremely different. But before I tell you about that, let me just introduce myself. My name is Carena Hulley. I'm an occupational therapist working with young children, predominantly with a diagnosis of autism. I've also worked for many years in the mental health system, working with people with a variety of personality disorders, and I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with people with narcissistic personality disorders and other types of personality disorders. And I think this puts me in a unique position to be able to clearly explain what the difference is between the lack of empathy we see in autism and the lack of empathy we see in narcissism. And they are, in fact, very different. Okay, so the first thing I think is to think about what empathy is and to realise that empathy is more than one set of skills. In fact, it's at least two sets of skills. And if we understand that it's made up of two very different sets of skills, we can start to see how the lack of empathy in autism and the lack of empathy in narcissism are indeed very different. So the two components of empathy are, one, what's called affective empathy. I like to think of it as physiological empathy because it's just something that our body does or feels without us thinking about it. And the second component is cognitive empathy, which is when we think about things in order to explain what's going on for somebody else. So let me just start by explaining what affective or physiological empathy is. This is when someone that we care about or somebody we know well walks into the room and we just straight away we get a feeling for what that person is feeling. And we do this by mirroring some of their bodily movements. So if their shoulders are up high, we might just slightly increase our shoulders. We mirror some of their nonverbal gestures. And other things also happen. So we actually entrain ourselves to the other person as well. So if their heartbeat is higher, our heartbeat will go up slightly to come towards that rhythm. If their blood pressure is slightly higher, our blood pressure might go up slightly. If they're breathing more quickly, our breathing might go up slightly as well. So we actually bring our body slightly into line with theirs, which gives us some very important cues about what's going on for that other person. So if your body is suddenly more tense, you're breathing more quickly, your heart rate is racing, your body's going to start to feel scared itself because that's how we feel scared. And therefore we'll know that the other person is maybe scared or anxious or that something like that is happening for them. So we haven't thought about it. Our body has actually given us cues, okay, and actually moved us slightly towards their state. So we actually feel it in our body. We actually start to feel a little bit more stressed or a little bit more happy or a little bit more relaxed just by coming together with that other person. And this is not purely a human trait. This is a very, very primitive response that's very common in herd animals and tribal animals like ourselves. One of the things that allows us to do this, to in some ways for our body to copy the emotional state of the other person, is something called mirror neurons. These are neurons within our brain, and what they do is quite amazing. They were discovered in the 1990s. So if, for example, there's a painful stimuli going on. So if I watch you being injected maybe with a needle, the parts of your brain that light up to show that pain response and the experience that you're having and the emotional state that's following on from you having that injection, the same parts of my brain will light up so that I actually get an experience very similar to your experience. It won't have the same level of intensity, but I will actually feel your pain, okay? So while your pain receptors in your brain are lighting up, the same areas of my brain will be lighting up as well, even though there is no painful stimulus being directly impacting me. Okay, and we can think about how these mirror neurons work not just with pain, but for example, if you go to the football, for example, and you see somebody leap up to catch the ball, you can actually feel that in your own body, even if you're not capable of doing it yourself. And the same when we watch dance, we can actually feel some of that, and that's some of the joy of watching somebody move beautifully, is that we can feel some of it in our own bodies, and that's called kinesthetic empathy, which is part of this affective or physiological empathy. Okay, so the mirror neurons are extremely important, and for children with autism, they have affective or physiological empathy, but they don't quite have it to the same intensity as people in maybe the normal population or whatever we want to call people. So their abilities are slightly reduced, but they still have this skill. So if you're very upset and you have a child with autism, it's not unusual for them to come and cuddle up with you on the couch. So they'll actually be able to feel that you're upset, or they'll feel that you're angry, or they'll feel that you're in a particularly happy or good mood. They can pick up on that stuff. The person with narcissism or the person with a psychopathic disorder, they don't have this skill. They can't pick up or join that sort of emotional state. So they can't feel how you're feeling. So if you're walking into the room and you're really happy, it's very contagious for the rest of the room. They're not going to pick it up. They're not going to catch that feeling from you, and they're not going to know how you're feeling. Okay, so this is a major deficit for people who have a narcissistic personality disorder, right through to the person who's maybe a malignant narcissist or even a psychopath, that these mirror neurons don't function in the same way, they don't trigger in the same way that they do for the child with autism or for the sort of normal population. So it's a really big difference, and this is where the deficit lies for the narcissist or the psychopath. They just cannot catch these feelings. They can't feel how you're feeling, and it's a really major deficit for them. Okay, the second component of empathy is the cognitive empathy. So this is when we see somebody or we think about how their day has been and we come up with theories of what's going on for them. We come up with a theory of why that person's happy, why they're sad, why they're angry, and sometimes we might get it right, sometimes we might get it wrong, and some of us are better at it than others. So you really need this in order to really be for the full experience of empathy. So you not only need to know how the person's feeling, but you need a theory of why that is and what might make the person feel better or make that person feel happy again. So the child with autism really struggles in this area. They don't have the same amount of thought process just generally going on in the brain. There's less what they call theory of mind. So the child is not making as many theories in their head about what's going on. They're not thinking as much about what is going on for the other person. Also, the child with autism or the person with autism misses a lot of social cues and facial gestures. They might not have the same level of eye contact. They might not be quite as aware of what's going on with your face and with your body as somebody else. And they also tend to miss a lot of what's going on in the environment. So they may not notice something that's happened to you. So they don't quite understand why it is you're sad or unhappy or angry. Okay, so it's not that they can't feel your pain or feel your emotions. It's that they really struggle to pick up on the sort of social factors in it, and they don't have that same cognitive understanding of what's going on for the person, and they miss a lot of social cues, which makes this task much harder for them than for another person. So they have a major deficit in the cognitive component of empathy. Whereas a person who's a narcissist or a malignant narcissist or a psychopath, they tend to have superpowers when it comes to cognitive empathy, possibly because they've grown up without affective empathy, they've had to compensate. They've had to become much better at understanding what makes people feel angry or sad or happy or joyful or loved. And this is one of the reasons they're so good at being able to manipulate people's feelings, because they have probably a better understanding of how to manipulate people's emotions and a better understanding of what's making somebody angry or sad or happy or loved or whatever the state might be. So if you think about the person who's a narcissist, you can see that they're not going to be as impacted as much by your mental state or your emotional state as another person might be. So if I am feeling very upset and I'm in a relationship with you, I'm going to make you feel upset and uncomfortable, and therefore you're going to be motivated to make me feel better. And when you start to make me feel better, you'll feel better yourself. So it creates this sort of social positive loop where we actually want to make the people around us feel better and happy and for them to enjoy our company. Whereas the person with narcissism, that doesn't work because they're not affected by your state. Okay, so even if you're feeling bad, it doesn't make them feel bad. And also if you're feeling happy, it doesn't make them feel happy as it would with somebody without this sort of problem. So you can see their motivation to make you feel good is not there in the same way. It also means that they can take their toxic emotions and which impact on you, and they once again don't get a feedback loop. They don't realise, or they don't have that connection to know that it's making you feel bad. So it doesn't put a brake on their toxic emotions in the same way that it would for somebody else. So now you can start to understand why the person who's a narcissist behaves in the way that they do and why they don't really care about how you're feeling, because they just don't get it. They don't understand it at all, and there's not that normal sort of social break on their behaviour that there is for other people, including children with or people with an autistic spectrum disorder. Okay, so let me just give you an example of how this might play out, how the difference in empathy between a person with autism and a person who's a narcissist, and how that might play out quite differently. So let's just say it's your birthday today, and the person that you care about or the person you're in a relationship with, they give you a present, and just say the present's a hat or whatever. You open the present and your face lights up, you're happy, and the other person straight away gets that buzz that they've actually done a good job, they've picked a present that you really like, you're really happy with it, and they straight away know because they can feel it. They can feel your happiness, they can feel your joy. You don't even have to tell them that you like it. I mean, they don't need that because they already know just from watching you and being in the same space as you and in training their body to your body that they actually know that you've enjoyed the present and that you like the present, and you don't have to say anything more about it. Okay, if we think about the person with narcissism and how that plays out, it's quite different. So the person with narcissism, just say they've brought you this amazing orange hat with a purple feather, you open it, you hate it, okay? They don't pick that up, okay? They don't pick it up. If you liked it, they wouldn't pick it up either. So what they have to do is they have to get secondary gains out of giving you a present because they can't get those normal social rewards that we get from giving a present to somebody that we care about. So they have to go for the secondary gains, and the secondary gains might be about attention. It might be they might just be trying to show people that they do follow social rules, and they know there'll be some consequences if they don't follow the social rule of giving you a present. Or they might come up with an excuse for not giving you a present that, you know, they were too busy, too important, they had other things to do, they'll get around to it, you've already got too much stuff, what would you want, all of that sort of stuff. So they might come up with lots of elaborate stories. They might spend quite a lot of time talking about how much trouble they've gone to or how much expense they've gone to buy you a present. And it's really about them. It's about meeting their needs and them often getting attention or social attention. It's not about you. It's about them. And there might be all sorts of secondary gains they can get. Like I've come across a couple of circumstances where the person would collect money from the whole extended family. Maybe they would collect, say, $200 from the extended family, and then they'd walk past an op shop, they'd see a hat there that looked like it could be more than $5. They buy the hat for $5 and they pocket the $195 profit, and then tell everybody this a very elaborate story about how expensive the hat was, how it could have been Coco Chanel. Somebody else said that you'd love it. They went out of their way. That blah 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 blah. So they're getting the attention, and they're getting a profit out of it. So that's their gain out of giving you a present, not about making you feel good or feel happy. Okay, so it's a very different experience from the sort of normal relationship, for want of a better word. Okay, the child with autism, they might also, or the person with autism might also miss the mark when they're buying you a present, but for completely different reasons. Okay, so the person with autism is likely to put quite a bit of thought into the present. They're likely to maybe save up money. They're likely to go to quite a bit of trouble to get something they think you want. The problem often is that they've misread your social cues or what you've said. So maybe you've said something ironically and they've picked up on it. So for example, let's go back to the hat. Maybe they bought you the bright orange hat with the pink feather because a few months ago you were in a shop and you were mucking around trying on silly hats while you were waiting for somebody else to finish trying on something, and you had a fun time and you said, oh, I love this hat, doesn't it look great on me, I wish I had a hat like this. So they've not really picked up the social cues, that you're just joking and being silly and being playful just so that you can have a pleasant social experience with them. They've misinterpreted that, saved up their money and gone back and bought the hat. Okay, so their intention is very pure. They want to make you happy. They will also look to you and they will try and get that sort of positive feeling from giving you that present. Okay, they're not after secondary gains. They're not trying to make some profit. They're not trying to attention seek out of it. They're not trying to make the whole afternoon about themselves. Okay, so they're not after the secondary gains. They actually want to make you happy. It's just they may have got it wrong because they've misread some of the social cues or the social messages you've given out about what sort of present that you might like. Okay, so hopefully that example helps you work out exactly what's going on in the relationship that you're in, whether it's somebody just misreading social cues or whether it's somebody really trying to get secondary gains or just really trying to look after their own needs in that circumstance. Okay, so just quickly to recap, the person with autism is able to feel the physiological or the affective component of empathy that's just slightly at a lower sort of level, and possibly because of that lower level it makes it hard for the child to learn by imitating other people in the same way that people generally can. But the person with narcissism has some major deficits in that area. Okay, so they have real problems catching a feeling or being able to feel your pain or feel your happiness or feel your joy. That's what they really have a major deficit in that area. The cognitive empathy, that is where the child with autism has their major deficits. So it's about thinking about why you might be upset, thinking about why you might be happy, thinking about how to make you happy or how to please you, that they really might get that quite wrong and they might need quite a lot of help to pick up on that stuff. Whereas the person with narcissism or right through to a person with a psychopathic disorder, they are extremely good and have quite amazing skills, often super skills in the area of cognitive empathy. So they really understand how to manipulate people or what to do in order to bring about the behaviours in the person that they're in a relationship with. Okay, so I hope that was helpful and thank you very much. Okay, goodbye.